Hello everyone, and welcome to our very first video on Weakaura challenge series. And today, we're tackling the very famous elemental blast problem and making a beautiful Weakaura that lets you know which of the 3 stat procs you just got. I'm also going to be showing you a very fast to make budget Weakaura, even though I don't really recommend it. But before we start, make sure to press the like and the subscribe button, and feel free to share this video with your guildies to help them solve any problems they might be having. But now, let's get into the video. Okay, so why is exactly this a bug, or what exactly is the problem about Elemental Blast? First, let's understand this ability. This is an ability we cast and can give us one of 3 stats between Aced, as we can see in the tooltip, Critical, Aced, or Mastery, and it gives us for 8 seconds above that increases that by 3.5k. Now, I already noted here the ID of one of these, but you can see here, and this is why it's an issue, the crit is that ID that I typed there. Should I get the Aced instead, or the... yeah, there we go. The Aced instead is exactly the same ID. So we can't actually put different IDs to see which buff we got. They are all called the Elemental Blast, so we can't make a Weakaura that procs Elemental Blast and tells us. So we could, in theory, make different IDs for different bonuses that we get, whether it's Aced, Mastery, or Crit, but again, all of them share the same ID. So right now we have a quite big problem because we can't access this information. We can't make a Weakaura that just pops on our screen saying, hey, you've procced Aced, or hey, you've procced Crit, or hey, you've procced Mastery. And we really need to know when we proc those things. I'm not a Shaman pro at all, but some of our players in Clarity have, like the Elemental Shamans, have asked about a Weakaura for these because they really need to know if they proc Aced more than the others. So that's why I'm going to show you 2 solutions. I'm going to show you a quick fix solution and a more permanent solution. So just so we understand the problem even in more depth, let's actually get here and use this function called a unit buff. And before we even get to the unit buff, let's actually get the information from the spell. There's this function called /dump, and then get spell info, and then we can do Elemental Blast. And now we're gonna look at the spell information. So looking at the spell information, there's nothing here that's gonna tell us anything useful at all. So that's why we're gonna use the API from the unit buff. And for this, we do something similar. We do /dump unit buff, and then we say the unit is the player and the buff is Elemental Blast. Now I need to proc this and then press enter. So right now I got the Elemental Blast, or whatever I proc critic here. But if we look at about this buff, we see it's magic, there's all these numbers, there's the time, the player, blah blah blah, true, falses, there's the value, 3500, but there's still no information of Crit, Mastery, or Haste. And now this is a very big problem. So I'm kind of panicking, and I open eTrace, right? Okay, so anyway, attempt number 2, here we go. Okay, so here we go. Now we're gonna look at this combat log event and filter spell aura apply. This is beautiful. Elemental Blast. Here it is. But again, and here's the ID that we kept getting before. We know it's a buff. We know all this information. But again, there's still no information whether it is Crit, Mastery, or Aced. And I can look through all of these as much as I want, and still there will be no information whatsoever that I just got a proc of Aced, Crit, or Mastery. So right now, after trying all of these, this is now a big problem. And this is just a flaw on the game, how the game was designed, not necessarily on the private server, but from Blizzard itself, where the game was designed in this way and we can't access this information. So because of this, now we can get in one of two solutions. Alright, so the first solution is actually a very bad solution, but if you need something quick, just to make sure that you get this ASAP, some sort of information, attention, this solution will not work 100%, but if you want something very quick that can solve this issue somewhat, you can make a Weakaura. Let's call it Elemental Blast. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna spend that much time on display. The buff, it's gonna be called Elemental Blast, and yeah, I mean, all of this is right. Now we are gonna add another trigger, and we're gonna make it all triggers, so it's both. So we're gonna check whether we have the debuff, and the second thing that we're gonna check is our player information and our character stats, and whether our haste rating actually increased in 3.5k or 3500. So right now my haste, it's exactly 400, so that's 4,481 with another 3.5k. That's yeah, that's 7 here, and that's a 9 here. So right now I'm checking if my haste is exactly this amount. This means that I just procced elemental haste. Now, why is this so bad? Because this doesn't count for other things that you get haste from. If you get haste from another proc, another trinket, a spell bonus, or a food stat, like when you will make this Weakaura, you'll actually get to your maximum full buffed status on raid with everyone on raid, and then check your natural haste, and then increase that 3.5k, and then you can see if this is the haste. Now on display I can just instead of this I can type haste or something like that, and another thing you could do is the exact same process but for all three stats. Okay, so right now if I do this elemental blast, you'll see I got well, that's mastery, but I will get haste hopefully soon. That's mastery again, and that's okay. So that was haste, but I also got haste from this thing. So this exactly here is why this Weakaura is bad. But let's get just a haste here, and there we go. There's no more haste, and I can see that there we go, the haste appears. So you'll have to count all the other factors of haste to put a precise number. And this is a very quick solution, but this is a very, very bad solution. So because of this not being the final solution that we want, and especially because you will have to make 3 Weakauras, all of them with the 3 same mistakes, we'll actually get now into the better solution, and with custom code a lot, but it's totally worth it to actually solve this issue. Alright, now that we've seen the first solution and how bad it is, let's actually get into the second solution. I just want to mention one thing, just a quick disclaimer. This solution was actually made by our boy Antardium. He's a very, very smart person when it comes to Weakauras and coding, and he has made some really cool stuff, and this one is included. So I do not take credit for the Weakaura that you're about to see, but I asked for his permission, obviously, and yeah, he gave me the green light in being able to share with everyone. He's genius, honestly. So anyway, let's actually make Weakaura here. I am gonna say, Antardium, if you're watching this, you made it into 2 Weakauras. I'm gonna make it into 1, so I'm gonna make it a little bit more polished, but besides that, yeah. Anyway, so let's make a Weakaura here, and let's call it Elemental Blast. And in the first trigger, we're gonna check if we have the buff, Elemental Blast. And yeah, this is just one of the triggers. The second trigger, we're actually going to put this on any triggers, because the second trigger is actually a trigger that's not going to be used, but it's going to do information that we need for the display, essentially. So even though this trigger is not being used, at least it's doing something, and that's why any triggers, because it's going to trigger from trigger 1. That's what we want. So that being said, let's go into custom, and you could check this a lot, like with the ETH trace and stuff, but I've already checked, already tested. So it's combat, log, event, unfiltered, and by now we know a lot about this event, right? And another one, combat, rating, update. So these are the two events that we're gonna check, and there's no timing, there's nothing. The timing is essentially gonna be from the trigger one. But here in trigger, let's actually start a function and start importing stuff from this function. Now, before we actually start importing stuff from this function, we're gonna do something here that I haven't done in the Weakaura guides, and that's just gonna check the event and start an array or a table or whatever you want to call it. That's just going to be called ... I could put any other word here, but I'm going to call it ... and that just contains all the other arguments after event. Sorry, I'm actually going to take this S off. And now I'm going to create a bunch of local variables. The first one I'm just going to call A. And this is just so we can abbreviate or underscore env. Legit, whenever I place type A from now on, it's just gonna be as if it was or env. So just so I don't have to keep typing or env all the time. And then I'm gonna do 3 more variables. One, we're gonna check the sub event, and the sub event is going to be something we're going to do in a second. Another one is we're going to check the source unit, aka who gets the buff. And then we're going to check the spell name, which is Elemental Blast. So because we've done this table here, we're actually going to use a select tool here. Select. And I know already, so if I were to do something like this, ETH trace, and look at the combat event on log unfiltered and stuff, I can look, and keep in mind, not always this order is right, so you might have to print it to check a correct order, but I already know that the one I want here, the sub event, is the second arg. The first one is event, then we have time, right? Now that's 1 in this table, that's time, and then this arg1 actually doesn't exist, and this arg1 is actually the spell already applied. And yeah, I mean, it's just I just know already that it's gonna be 2, and we're gonna take this second argument from which variable? Well, the table called ... I hope that makes sense. But yeah, essentially what we're doing here is we're not doing importing all the arguments, and we're just calling them ... And from there, we're going to select a specific number from all the things hidden inside this ... And we're taking the number 2 out of ... That's essentially what we're doing. Here, we're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be number 5 out of ... And here, it's actually going to be number 13 that we're gonna get from ... And I'm just gonna take these spaces. I don't want this to mess up the code, but yeah, this should be fine. And now I've done these variables, and now with these variables, I'm just gonna do basically the conditioning to enter this Weakaura. Like, what's the conditioning for this code to happen? So the condition is if the sub event equals spell cast, because we want to see sorry, I mistyped that, spell cast success. So now we're going to check if the source unit is equal, and we're going to do a get unit name function here, get unit name, and we're just going to check who is the player. So essentially we're doing like in this combat log event and unfiltered, this argument that is now called sub-event, source unit, if that matches the name of the player, and the name of the player is just checked by doing this here. And finally, we're gonna check if the spell name, so argument 13, where we see the spell name, we're gonna check if that equals elemental blast, right? Now we've done all the conditions to enter this Weakaura and the code that I'm about to type. So right now we're gonna type a dot, and again, remember how this a just means or env, it's just abbreviating, right? So previous haste, we're gonna check our previous haste before the thing, right? And that's gonna be before whatever we do after. That's what I meant, basically. So the spell cast success, we still don't have this. We still don't have this buff. We still don't have the buff. So we still have raw values. So we're gonna check that. And now that's gonna be another thing here called get combat rating. And this API, it's really cool. So check this out. It returns the number of points of a specific combat rating the player has. So if I want to check any stat of the player in raw numbers, not percentiles or whatever, I do this, and then inside this I select which one of these I want to get. So that being said, what I'm gonna do here is get combat rating, and then I just open and put the code for combat rating haste spell. And now I'm gonna keep doing that for the other ones. Previous mastery, that's gonna be get combat rating CR mastery, and finally a dot previous crit, and that's gonna be get combat rating, and finally CR underscore crit underscore spell, all in caps. And now we will end this. Okay, we've set these variables, and this is basically gonna tell us all all our valuables of our stats just before getting the buff. Now we're gonna check if the event, and that's like the main one here, aka combat log event unfiltered, or the other one which we did over here, which was combat rating update. Now we're gonna check if the event, instead of combat log event unfiltered, is actually combat rating update. And if that happens, now we're gonna open a couple more variables here, and on the same train of thought of these is essentially like what we're gonna do, but now after getting this update, and it's gonna be a current haste, local current mastery, and local current crit. Now, again, to do this, we're just legit gonna type, well, not type, we can actually just copy paste here. It's gonna be equal to get this, and then this, it's gonna be equal to that, and this, sorry, right there, it's gonna be equal to that. Alright, so now we're getting all the stats. Now, after we get all the stats of after getting the buff, whatever buff it was, we're gonna check which buff was it. Okay, now we're gonna compare our stats and check what buff actually we just got. So we do if current haste, so if the haste that we have at the moment equals, and instead of checking for a value, that's just so hard to calculate, we are actually gonna do a little math here, and that's something I love about code. You can actually put math in here and it just works beautiful. So if the current haste is equal to the previous haste plus this 3500 that we just got, right? Then we're gonna open a variable that's gonna be global, so it can go into this place, called elemental blast stat, and that's gonna be called, and that's gonna be equal to, that's gonna contain this word aced. Okay, because we just got aced. Now, else if, because now we're gonna check, on the other hand, if that was not the case, did our current mastery, is our current mastery equals to the previous mastery plus the 3500, then what are we going to do instead? Now we're going to do the same thing. Elemental blast stat is equals to mastery. Else if, so if it was neither of these cases, then surely if the current crit is equals to a previous crit plus the 3500, then elemental blast stat is going to be equals to critic or crit, whatever. And then we're just going to end all of these. And that's basically our code here. I hope this made sense, but we're still not done, okay? We're still not done, because now we need to go on our display here, and instead of this text, we're just gonna make a custom one, and this custom is actually gonna be checked every frame. Otherwise, it can mess up, but this is the very beautiful part of making the Weakaura like this. Triggers on every frame is bad. Display on every frame is okay as long as it doesn't have a lot of checks. So all we're gonna do here, because we've done all the math and all the code on triggers, is we're just gonna return elemental blast stat, because remember this was a global function, and we're gonna end. And that's it. Now it's gonna return. Let's make this a little bit probably 20, and let's anchor this to the center so it looks nice and pretty. And look how simple this is in a way, where we've done all of these, we've compared the stats, 0 conditions, 0 actions, everything's done in trigger and display. And now, in theory, if we attack this guy, when we get the buff, okay, it says aced, let's see, it was actually crit. Alright, so I actually made a mistake along the way, and this just goes to show coding can be very frustrating at times. I actually found it out fairly quickly, but yeah, here on current aced, if current aced equals or and then the previous aced plus the math, I actually put this little character here, this underscore, too much. So let's remove that and click OK. So again, it's gone. And now, if we actually attack this guy, we can see that it prints crit because we got crit. Should we reset and send again? It prints mastery because we got a mastery. And finally, let's just get a haste proc here. That's mastery again. Please, that's crit again. And that's mastery. Okay, you get the idea. It works. I just am stubborn and I really want a haste proc here. Hopefully very soon. And I mean, essentially what we've just accomplished here is grab something that was a bug essentially in the client, and through our way on Weakauras and code and stuff, and through some math, we actually found a way for us to distinguish between all of these ones, and that's just awesome. I mean, here we go. Here's the aced one. As you can see, it works for all three of them. Now, of course, we can go make like other things here, show cooldown, and make it more pretty. Maybe it glows, and maybe you add the text here, which is just P, and that P is in this type of format, and the size is like 30. And let's assume the anchor here is just on the top, for example, outer and top. And yeah, I mean, this is just the best way that we found to solve this issue. You can make it look whatever you want. This looks bad, but you get the idea. It is dynamic, so it can count down, I mean, then the display is just really up to you. But yeah, this is the very first episode of Weakaura challenges, and the first challenge, it's basically done. And the next one, it's gonna be really fun. And a big thanks today for Antardium's code here, because it was a huge help, and it was very, very smart. But yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna sign off. Hope this helped everyone out there and that's playing Shaman at least. So yeah, take care and peace.